Good afternoon, everyone. We talk about building great nations, which only as strong as all of its parts, not half of it, right? To build a great nation. So gender equality is not only women's cause. It's the foundation every thriving society built on. We are here at Delphi, a place built on the pursuit of truth, to ask one of the defining questions of our era. What does a truly equal world look like? And how do we get there? So we may find that our panelists may not see eye to eye sometimes, which is totally agreeable and exactly the point. So we are here to create clarity and leave with something truly valuable. My job is to make sure every perspective is heard and every assumption is challenged. So let's begin. I'll start with Sherry Khan. Sherry Graham Talabani is the president of SEED, a women-led local nonprofit development organization in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, a human rights lawyer with over 25 years of experience in foreign policy development, strategic leadership, advocacy, and managing international programs. She has worked extensively in conflict and post-conflict settings, as well as in humanitarian response, peacekeeping, and development. Sherry Khan, the question is, as we know, Kurdistan has made notable strides in recent years, yet gender gaps in political representation, economic participation, and institutional leadership persists. So let me ask you directly, if gender equality is genuinely recognized as a driver of prosperity and not just a social obligation, what is the single most important structural change Kurdistan's institutions must make today to turn that recognition into reality? The floor is yours.
Thank you, May.
Sure.
And thank you all for being here and staying this late in the conference, but it has been a really productive 2 days, and so I thank Simeon and everybody at the Delphi Forum, including here in Slemani. So my husband pretty much stole my punchline this morning, which is the answer to your question, which is gender equality is not only an issue about rights, but it's about institutional development, economic competitiveness, and social resilience. So today I wanted to share 5 lessons from international experience and from Kurdistan's own development. I've been living here for 13 years and I've been working here on and off for 28 years. So these lessons are not just about women. They're about how Kurdistan can fully utilize its human capital. We've talked a lot about human capital the last few days, how we can strengthen our institutions and build a more prosperous future. And I'll take my slides. I know this is not a Delphi thing to have the slides, but we're going to do that today because a picture tells 1,000 words. So the first lesson is about how women's participation drives economic growth. And the economic case is clear. No economy can maximize growth while underutilizing its human capital. So yesterday we talked, the minister talked about 2% of the human capital of any population are entrepreneurs. And he talked about how important it is to utilize that 2%. What about the 50% of our population contributing to the economy? So countries that focus on increasing women's participation in the economy and benefit from higher productivity, more diversified economies, better household income, greater resilience overall. And so it's not just about inclusion, it is about economic growth and competitiveness. And you can see that the OECD countries have 52% of its population in the workforce, and here in Kurdistan we have about 14%. It's a little bit better than Baghdad, but it's not quite where we need it to be. So what would it mean to close the gender gap in Iraq and Kurdistan? The World Bank estimates that increasing female participation in the labor force by 5% would result in an increase of Iraq's GDP by 1.6%, which translates to $4.5 billion per year. And the good news is we are not dependent on Baghdad for this in Kurdistan. We can do this here on our own. We can adopt the policies and practices that allow greater women's participation in the workforce. So how do we do this? So the first piece is about education. Kurdistan has already achieved one of the most important development goals. We have educated a generation of talented young women. Women now comprise half of the university students in the Kurdistan region. So that's a very remarkable achievement. Yet, as you can see, that has not translated into participation in the workforce, and you can see a drop-off from 52% to 14% in the labor force. So today's challenge is no longer getting women into schools, but transforming educational achievement into economic participation. And how do we do this? Well, one way is to strengthen the pathways from education to employment through internships, mentorships, entrepreneurial support, investing in women businesses, investing in STEM opportunities, which we heard was all about the future of our economy, science and technology. Private sector partnerships, so universities partnering with the private sector. The third lesson is about investing in family-friendly policies, because these are economic policies. One of the most important lessons that we have from global experience is that women's participation is strongly influenced by how societies organize caregiving responsibilities. Many women around the world have two jobs. One is paid and one is unpaid. And sadly, this is not just in Kurdistan. This is a global challenge, right? Highly educated women often leave the workforce not because they lack ambition or competency or ability, but because work and balancing family life is too challenging and unsustainable. So women worldwide perform the majority of unpaid work. This is childcare, elder care, caring for the elderly and their family, and managing the household. And these responsibilities are called the invisible economy. So this is an economic issue, because when talented women leave the workforce, economies lose productivity, innovation, and leadership. So we know that supporting families supports economic participation, and countries that successfully increase women's participation in the workforce, they are investing in family-friendly policies, which includes improves retention, recruitment, productivity, and employee satisfaction. So we shouldn't look at these investments as investments in women or benefits only for women, but they're investments in workforce participation and growth. And they help the whole family to be better off, more economically productive, and more resilient. And so this is true for both government employees and in the private sector. Many of you know that last year the KRG put forward a labor law, which went to Parliament, and it was passed, but now it's on hold. And this is a critical objective for the next government and the next Parliament. That law had many critical points that fostered women's participation in the workforce. One of them I thought was truly innovative was incorporating childcare facilities in all government institutions. Now, that's very ambitious, and maybe in America we would say an unfunded mandate, but really innovative, and it's the type of intervention that can enable women to enter the workforce. And at SEED, we're a women-led and a mostly women-staffed organization. We have a variety of interventions and supports and policies and practices that enable women to do their work effectively and contribute and lead, but also lead in the family as well. And so there are simple things that you can do. Some of them are listed here. And we also have paternity leave to allow our male staff to also play a role in caregiving. The fourth lesson is about safety. Mm-hmm. Women need safe workplaces. Women can't participate fully in economic life if they don't feel safe. And safety is often discussed as a social issue, but believe me, it's also very much an economic issue. Businesses cannot attract and retain talented women if employees do not trust that they will be protected. And just as economies require roads, electricity, telecom, they also require safe workplaces. The World Bank says that women are more likely to participate in the workforce when they have protection from harassment, safe transportation, effective complaint mechanisms, and confidence in the accountability system.
Sherry Khan, can I stop you here?
Yes.
Can we have a practical example about safety at workplace? And also, if you can tap quickly on the UN resolution 1325, I believe, in regard to protection, prevention, and participation of women, and in regard to GESI, gender equality and social inclusion framework. If that we can...
So 1325 is extremely broad, but I really want to focus on sexual harassment because I've been waiting for that question for the last 10 years. So let me tell you about what we can do about sexual harassment. Every company, every organization, every government institution should have a zero-tolerance policy towards sexual harassment. It should not be tolerated in any way, shape, or form. You want all of your employees to be safe. So that means setting the policy, leading the policy, creating complaint mechanisms where people can feel safe from retaliation if they complain, where we can have unbiased investigation and action. We need this across Kurdistan. So this is my most important recommendation. I just want to say, if we address this, then we can address longer-term problems or challenges, such as conservative social norms, because what we find is that families are resistant to women participating in the workforce when it's women and men together, because they are, to a great degree, worried about their safety. So we have to address the safety issue. And over time, we can address the conservative social norms about women in the workplace when people feel it's safer. And I've seen dramatic change in the 28 years that I've been working in the Kurdistan region, and I know we can tackle this issue. Sexual harassment in the workplace is a pervasive problem.
Yes.
So we've got to have everybody working and everybody committed to this policy. So one of the suggested ways that the next government can address economic growth is to be adopting a sexual harassment policy across the government. It's a very practical reform. It doesn't cost money to say that you're against sexual harassment and that you want your employees feeling safe. And this is absolutely fundamental to a modern economy. So lesson 5 is about that stronger institutional framework, so the laws, the policies, the practices that create opportunities for women. So many countries have adopted policies and laws for promoting equality, and the most successful ones focus on implementation. So for Kurdistan, the pending labor law is one of the most important things to start with for the next parliament. A modern framework for labor is a key economic development issue. For the next KRG, I urge the leadership to make women's participation an economic priority. So to develop a whole of government strategy, which includes laws, implementing the laws that we have an equal pay law, so let's make sure that that's implemented. Adopting a zero-tolerance sexual harassment policy. And if we can't get the whole government, I would suggest we just start here in Slemani, where we already have a huge political will towards these issues. And I couldn't really stop at 5 because I just wanted to squeeze one more lesson in here, which is about leadership. The goal is not to just get women in the workplace, but the goal is to ensure that women lead institutions. Kurdistan has already invested heavily in women's education. The next step is making sure that women are adequately represented in decision-making. And this requires very intentional action. Government can appoint women to senior positions. So I call on the two leading parties. We know pretty much the two parties that will be in the lead for government formation to appoint women to leadership roles, both at the political and technical level. And I think my husband has done an incredible job of that in the ministries and also here in Slemani. And you can see what the incredible achievements that they've had. So women here, there are many competent, capable women that can rise up if they're given the opportunity. So same for companies. I urge the companies to create fair and equal promotion pathways, to adopt these sexual harassment policies, and adopt family-friendly workplace conditions. And universities can do a great job at contributing to helping women with the practical skills they need to succeed in business, in STEM jobs, and in public service. So all of us should be also thinking about that 2% and investing in women entrepreneurs. Leadership doesn't happen automatically. It has to be cultivated. So this has to be a priority for all of us. So in closing, these are the five and a half lessons of investing in women's participation. We've already completed one level of empowerment through women's education. And we have a hugely talented young women ready to enter the workforce. The next phase is that this talent is fully reflected in our workforce, our businesses, our institutions.
Thank you so much, Sherihan. That was really valuable and informative. Appreciate your input. Next, we'll go to Ms. May Zani from Greek. May is the president and co-founder of Women Act, a non-profit empowering women in public leadership in Greece. She holds a master's from the London School of Economics, completed the Women and Power program at Harvard, and brings experience from international organizations in Brussels and Paris. Welcome, Ms. Zani. So the question for you is that, looking back on a decade of working toward gender equality in Greece, from tackling deep-rooted stereotypes to empowering women in leadership, what do you believe are the most effective approaches, and how do you see emerging challenges like AI shape a road ahead for women? Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having us here. Thank you to Delphi. I've spoken in Delphi in Greece, but this year is a gift to come to this place, and also to include this topic in the conference event agenda. Very often we end up having this spoken by women to women in the audience and no one else. So I'm very happy to see all these men here. I want to thank Mr. Tsomokos, because a few years back I marched into his office and I said, no more man-elves. We want more women included everywhere. And well, I ambushed him. He said yes, and here we are now. Seriously now, I would like to start by saying that Greece is no Sweden. What do I mean by this? There is this thing called the Gender Equality Index in Europe, and we are consistently at the bottom of it. It's very sad, but it's also a wake-up call. It's part of the reason why my organization was founded by 8 women almost a decade ago. First in Athens, and now we have 15 hubs all over Greece, because part of the equation here is that there should be equality in geography as well. Not all women have access to come to places like this, to talk, to meet, to build their network. So we should take things to them. This is part of the game, really. When we talk about the future, very often it sounds terribly threatening, but part of its promise is that it can change things. For women, that means, for example, I'll say something concrete. For Women Act, we've moved most of our programs online. That means that the entire population doesn't have to come to Athens. We're no longer an Athens-centric organization. They can see our things and participate. We've had more than 4,000 women trained in our leadership academies this past decade, because we believe that part of the future involves upskilling and reskilling constantly. We very often focus on youth, and it's important. Of course, you have to start them early, as mentioned. Primary school, you start talking about empowerment, about equality, what it means, what it offers. But we also must not forget those left behind. I mean older women that do not have access to this digital world we're fixing. And we have to be fair. This is the whole point of change, fairness for all. I've spoken about visibility before and about our programs to have more women speak out, because we are the only organization in Greece that focuses on public leadership. So we care immensely about the fact that, for example, in 332 municipalities, we only have 22 women mayors. we think there's something very wrong in the fact that there's so many women are involved and they're ambitious. We should not forget there's no such thing as the ambition gap. What we have is a gap in opportunities. We have women who are participating, who very often take that little extra time they have from those 2 jobs you mentioned, the one in the morning in the office, the one that starts, the second shift that starts when they enter home, when they're supposed to be, they're sandwiched between taking care of the childcare and then also looking after elder parents. We're not talking about changing this system. We're talking about men, though, realizing that, as mentioned this morning by the Deputy Prime Minister, a country that does not look after 50% of its people misses out on 50% of its talent. So this is something that we should bring into the discussion. Visibility, reskilling, upskilling, this holistic approach all has to do with the fact that we want that 50% of the population to move ahead as well. Very often we talk about artificial intelligence and what is bringing, especially in Europe right now, most of the international fora talk about this brave new world that is coming and how we should all be anxious about it. I would like to say the following thing. It could help us. For example, we moved all our programs online because of COVID. What could we do? It was a necessity. And then we realized that they work for more women than before. So we kept them there. I think there's an amount of flexibility there that, this future holds for all of us. Second aspect I mentioned is the geography, how to build small networks in smaller places, not just focus on one big. And this very often comes because with all the work that women have comes a lot of isolation. And that is a very, very critical thing. We have to realize that ambition on its own, and even given the opportunities, will not work for anyone unless they have a network to sustain them, to support them. That's why I was happy reading for our panel to hear about your organization, because this is exactly the kind of thing we do at Women Act as well. The promotion of these networks may not seem like a big deal to the men in the audience, because most of them already have here quite a few people that they know from their positions or their public life. But for a woman who may sit and talk to her neighbor and exchange contact details and afterwards send a follow-up email saying, I read about this, I'm interested in this, it could change her life. So never underestimate what a small thing can do and what it can lead to. A conference could lead to a network contact, which could later on change your career, going into a new industry, or hearing about an opportunity you wouldn't get. And I'll finish here, coming into the public sphere, because as I mentioned, Greece also lacks enough women leaders. And by enough, I would say 50-50, because very often we demonize quotas, although they're necessary. Without them, we would have even less women around. And we don't just want them around, we want them to stay in the game. That means we want them to run for office, we want them not to be demotivated, we want them to have a network to sustain them, because very often you will see that their professional, social, family networks are not as encouraging as they would be if a man said, I'm going for that position or I'm running for office. So we need to change that by sustaining these networks to keep women trying, and also to help them when they're exposed to the toxicity of public life. Because of here and everywhere you have women who have run and then said, this is not for me. But if you can't see it, you can't be it, as we say. So for younger women to see them running again, succeeding, and ending up right up there where they should be. So if this is a panel or if this is a big leadership position, it's not just a signal, it's a calling. It says you can do it too, and we shouldn't forget that. Thank you.
Ms. Dani, before I move to the other panelists, you quickly give me 1-2 challenges and solutions. Tawad, you mentioned that there are more women in Greece that are into public leadership. So 1 or 2, we have less than 1 minute. If you can give me a challenge and solutions toward that women to get into that.
As a result of not enough women being invited to do exactly what I'm doing right now, speak in public, we had a severe lack of public speaking skills. Women were terrified. So we started doing specific leadership academies, inviting women to come up, have a speaking coach there, have an audience of friendly faces, that makes a difference, and giving them tips. And then we started showing them women in these environments, women in parliament, women in international organizations, women abroad, in Brussels, wherever. And slowly we started getting them engagements. That's important too. Women are not given enough opportunities to start. So you start by helping, mentoring a woman at work, or your intern, and you say, come along, come with me there. I'll introduce you to some people. Or why don't you talk about this thing in public? Slowly, it builds up.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your input. Thank you. I'll move now to Goshan Khan. Goshan Karadaghi is a seasoned educator and public health professional with over 13 years of experience in higher education, youth development, and gender equity. Currently serving as Dean of Students at AUIS. Also, she leads health development and capacity building initiatives across the Kurdistan region as Managing Director of the Kurdistan Health Summit. Bakhir Bek Goshan Khan. So the question to you is, how effectively has higher education in the Kurdistan region served as a catalyst for gender equality? And what persistent challenges continue to hinder women from fully participating and ascending to leadership roles? Floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. And I also want to thank my fellow panelists who've spoken already, because frankly, you've touched upon some of the subjects I wanted to speak on today, so you'll save me some time in the process. To the question relating to the influence of higher education, I think Ms. Sherry really eloquently pointed out that we don't have an issue with getting women into universities. We don't have an issue with getting women into higher education. What we do have an issue with is the education employment paradox, the fact that so many of them choose or are made to not enter the workforce after they enter education. So universities are not failing in attracting women. What they're failing in doing is enabling them to access opportunities after leaving university. And I'm here to speak on maybe not only as the Dean of Students or a faculty member at AUIS, but also as a Kurdish woman who is working in this particular environment. The question then comes forward about what are the barriers? What are the limitations that women are facing to enter the workforce? If it's not willingness, because that's demonstrated in their willingness to go to higher education, why would they pursue a degree if it's not going to get them anywhere afterwards? Then what are the things that are stopping them? And we've mentioned already issues related to social perceptions of responsibility within the home, within society, expectations of being homemakers, mothers, caretakers. But also, I think, and this is where I'm going to link it back to the responsibility of universities, there is an intrinsic bias and culture among, I'd say, people of this region especially, which buys into the idea that women are just not good or as good as men are when it comes to the pursuit of careers. And unfortunately, being an educator, I see this daily in the expressions of both male and female youth. It's somewhat expected from the male side because that's something that, you know, we tend to grow up with, but it's devastating to see that women who have such huge potential and such incredible skills don't believe that they are capable or that they are as effective as their male counterparts. And the simple stats that demonstrate this is that the highest achieving academic students are usually women. So the top 10% of students on campuses are usually primarily women. But the ones who enter the workforce, the CEOs, the managers, the ones who enter leadership roles are not women. And that's where I think universities have a significant role. Being the Dean of Students, I oversee the Career Services Centre on campus. And one of the things that I think we have being a team of women, we are biased, but one of the things we try to work into our curriculum and our services is challenging this idea of sort of self-bias of we're not good enough. Also, and we do this through trainings, we do this through networking opportunities, we do this by showing women that there are examples like you who are Kurdish or Arab or who have had to overcome many obstacles but have achieved great success in comparison to their male counterparts. This is an incredibly empowering thing for young women to see, especially when they are not as exposed to, let's say, Western women to such concepts as well. But I think also the area that I think we tend to forget and that I think will have the highest impact is engaging men, especially young men, in these particular conversations. One of the barriers that we find, and you can ask any woman here, is the underestimation of women when they enter a workforce. The idea that just because they are a woman, they may not have the same capabilities from not only the woman herself, but also her male colleagues and counterparts. It's really important for universities and possibly schools as well to challenge this by allowing young men to understand that this is something that women face and for them to actually witness that women are just as capable. And that could be both explicit in the form of training and talking about it and bringing up these subjects, which is something we do in our classrooms in AUIS. I teach a class on gender and health, and that's one of the favorite subjects that comes up is the concept that women are equal, but also giving the message to men that we cannot give space to women as a favor. We cannot let women, or we cannot tell women that they are in a position of authority because there's a quota or because that we are doing it to do something nice for them. We cannot let women do what they can. They should be intrinsically given that opportunity, regardless of whether the power is in the hands of the other or not. And that's a message that I think universities, schools, and society in general needs to embed in this new generation of men and women so that we can actually implement this into culture and action when it comes to the workforce thereafter.
Thank you so much. You still have 1 minute. Can you tap into what we were talking about earlier about the mental health and social support that you offer at UIS and how this is effective? Actually, mental health in many places are not very, not much weight to it, not given much weight to as it's supposed to be in many places.
Indeed.
So can you, a little bit in 1 minute, elaborate on that, please?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to relate this to, again, a point mentioned by Ms. Sherry about safety. When you provide infrastructure within systems that allows individuals who may be more vulnerable, so we're looking at younger people, we're looking at women specifically, but also even males who experience very difficult circumstances. If you provide them with infrastructure and services where they can get assistance, then they are more inclined to achieve their potential. And this is seen in academic success, it's seen in work success, it's seen in family success as well. So I think what we can do is, if we invest in there's a lot to do with relation to policy and infrastructure, but if I'm arguing that we need to invest in the social capital of our population. We need to invest in the ideologies and the acceptances of women and men in our society, and that comes with mental health support as well as kind of perceptions and changing culture.
Thank you so much. This is very, very crucial point indeed. Thank you, Goshan Khan. I'll go last but not least to Dr. Elizabeth Kendall, who is a president of Girton College, University of Cambridge. I go with the British accent the minute I speak to a British person, so I change my American accent too. And has previously held positions at Oxford, Edinburgh, and Harvard. Her research focuses on militant jihad groups and the conflict in Yemen and the broader Middle East. She lectures widely at government, military, and scholarly institutes worldwide. So, question to you, Dr. Kendall. Education is described as the prerequisites for everything else. Workplace equality, leadership, community prosperity, yet in parts of the world, that foundation is being actively dismantled. What does gender equality in education truly mean? And why should it be the starting point for any serious conversation about inclusive growth, including here in Kurdistan, maybe?
Massive question. Thank you.
Thank you for being
So,
here.
first of all, not only am I thrilled to be here, but I've been so impressed by all of the women I've spoken to here so far. And also, like you said, the fact that when the gender equality panel begins, it's not that all the men exit to have a cup of tea and you're just left with, the women talking to themselves. So I think this also backs up the words that we heard this morning from Deputy Prime Minister Qubat Talabani, which were music to my ears and really very powerful, albeit without the excellent slides. But the very fact that he mentioned access, representation, and opportunity, just those three words, to me said that there was a recognition here that it's not just about the access. It's about representation, participation, opportunity, and therefore influence. And these things are not automatic. There's no linear progression from the access to the influence via all these other elements. It requires a constant watch. And my firm belief is that at the root of this lies a strong and healthy education system. Because without furnishing women with the tools, the training, the confidence to be able to make the most of the workplace when they do get in, then really you're just joining an existing infrastructure. You're not influencing that infrastructure or helping to shape it. And it's at that point, the shaping it point, that you reap the dividends that Sherry spoke about. And I would broadly put these dividends into three boxes. One is the peace dividend, two is the prosperity dividend, and three is probably a planetary one in terms of the environmental dividend. All of these three big areas are massively helped when women are placed in leadership positions. So this isn't a question of being nice to women and being just to women. This is a question of whole of society, of all of society benefiting. And I wanted to share with you a little of my fieldwork experience before my current job. I think it's pretty clear that some of the initiatives that are happening in Kurdistan right now are very impressive, and as a model, as a theory, could end up as a leading light in the region, a model for others to follow. But it requires constant monitoring. The job's never done. We've seen that, for example, in Afghanistan. It can recede very quickly. And in my own work in Yemen, I have spent 10 or 12 years in and out of Yemen during the civil war, actually working on militant groups. But on the side, I've been finding ways to assist with women's education, partly because that's actually a very strong way of helping to protect against, I don't like the word radicalization, but against the influence of extremist groups. And there have been many surprises along the way. So one was when I tried to hold a large meeting for all of the activities that were going on grassroots in the east of Yemen. A whole bunch of women turned up, which we were surprised about, because in the eastern tribes where I was working, most of the guys I was working with, locals, said, oh, the women, you won't get any women here, they won't come along, they're not really doing anything. But they did. They came, but they all sat in one corner of a hall like this. And the men got up and told us about their organizations, and the women sat still. And at the end, I said, well, why don't the women talk to us? Oh, they won't want to do that. I said, well, let's ask them. So all the men got together in the huddle and said, should we ask them, shouldn't we? And then after about 10 minutes, they came to me and they said, good idea, we never thought of that, let's ask them. And the women came up one by one to talk about their work. They were amazing. They presented well, they were confident, they knew what they were doing, they were impressive. But one of the points they made very strongly to me was, we don't want to be like you, which was which of course I wasn't trying to turn them into a Western liberal woman, but it was really interesting to see how self-assured they were. Now, what we did then was start an education project. And again, the men said, well, the women won't sign up for that. It's literacy for grown women, adult women. They won't be interested. And if they are, they'll probably drop out because they have childcare issues. And it was full. The whole course was full. The entire 8 weeks, not one single woman dropped out. And they're a multiplier. Women teach their children. They teach their grandchildren. Sure. And in the survey that we did in the east of Yemen, we, meaning me and some local tribal confederations, we trained 70 field workers to ask questions around 10 provinces. And we found that women were far more interested in education, and they placed a much greater value on education than the men did. And when we dug down, it was because they feared their children being dragged into militias. But there was a but. And the but was education was less highly valued in areas where nepotism and corruption and the lack of a meritocracy were most prevalent. Because in order to value education, you need to be able to see the point of it. There's no point in completing your education if there are no opportunities, or if the opportunities rely more on who you know than what you know. So, some lessons there. I just want to finish off by saying a couple of really amazing statistics that complement Sherry's statistics. In terms of the peace dividend, setting up frameworks to try to train women to participate in peace and conflict negotiations is incredibly important if they're going to stick. Quite often, you have people negotiating these agreements, they sign, they look great on paper, and then they're impossible to translate on the ground. When women are involved in negotiating peace agreements, the agreements that result are 35% more likely to last more than 15 years. Women can't really be involved in that unless they're educated. And yet women only represent between 9 and 10% of negotiators in most of these peace agreement negotiations. And then lastly, prosperity. Closing the gender gap is estimated to unlock around about $350 trillion in global economic opportunity. So this isn't a charity case. This is good for all of us. I did mention the environmental dividend. That's more difficult to measure. But there is a UN statistic which says that if women participate in parliament just 1% more than they already do, that's associated with 0.5% lower in CO2 emissions, and there are a bunch of other statistics. If I'm to wrap up, I would say that, look, plenty of barriers still exist. I mentioned Afghanistan before. It's now been 5 years since women have been denied their education. One thing we're doing in Cambridge, which you might want to think about here as well, I can see plenty of role models around, is that in my college in Cambridge, we were the first women's college in the whole of the UK, Girton College. We're now We've been mixed for 50 years because we believe in diversity and inclusion. So we've embraced men. But, you know, the job is never done. And for 80 years at Cambridge University, women were not awarded degrees. They studied for them, they earned them, but they weren't awarded them. 30 years previously, women were awarded degrees in Istanbul. 20 years previously, women were awarded degrees in Beirut. It took another 20 years before they were awarded in Cambridge. But women could have their degrees recognized in Ireland. They could go across there, pay 20 quid and get a degree. And so what we're trying to do now is acknowledge the work that's being done by women in Afghanistan, acknowledge their degrees that are being earned underground. We can't award them degrees, but we can provide recognition and mentoring opportunities, which will work both ways. I know you want me to finish, but I want to stress that when I say both ways, I really mean that. We have privileged students at Cambridge. They don't understand their privilege often, and it's about opening their minds to different areas of the world where they can see how hard-won these privileges that we enjoy now are. Well,
thank you very much, Dr. Kendall. That was very, very valuable input. Thank you, everyone. And I want to lastly build on the point where you talked about referring to women. I noticed that sometimes, from my own experience, when we want to plan or want to do an institutional reform or policy reform for a certain group, I would love to see that the targeted group is involved in that, whether youth, whether minorities, like, you know, disabled, whoever minority, like to grant social inclusion, and also because like they are the best who knows what they want. So that's very, very important point to highlight. And in the end, I would love to thank everyone for listening to our topic. And I hope we all leave with the question in our head, what do an equal world would look like and how can we get there? Thank you, everyone.